Thank you, William. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I wish, first of all, to thank you for inviting me to share with you the practice adopted by the UAE during the COVID-19 pandemic in dealing with the challenges faced by the seafarers. In response to the pandemic, the UAE at the beginning has taken measures similar to other countries on restricting travel and crew change. Nevertheless, and recognizing the importance of the seafarer role, repatriation, signing off, has never stopped. Provided a return ticket and an airline service is available. So signing off was taking place normally as long as the seafarer has a return ticket. In addition, no ships with suspected cases on board. Some masters of ships, they were sending us report that they have suspected cases. There is some symptoms on the seafarers before they reach UAE waters and ports. At no event that the UAE has prevented ships from calling it is ports and water based on suspected cases. Medical test and medical care was provided to the ships and it is seafarers when required. So we adopted the open policies for all ships calling UAE water. As well, the UAE has participated in the International Summit on Impact of COVID-19 on Crew Change hosted by UK in last July, with the participation of 13 countries in total, to show its commitment and dedication to resolve the crew change crisis, which is a major issue faced by the seafarer during the pandemic. And it was one of the first countries to resume the crew change. We start resuming crew change in the UAE since August, once the airline industry had started back gradually resuming its services. It was difficult to take such a decision earlier as many airports was shut down and the airline services, they stopped offering their services. The process of crew change in the UAE has met by some challenges. We had some challenges in facilitating the crew change. The UAE is a hub in the region, so many ships is using our ports, Fujairah, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi as a hub for their crew change before the pandemic. So they were relying on us to take steps. This is the reason we opened the door earlier in August. However, as I mentioned, we faced some challenges, such as the lack of cooperation from some of the seafarer embassies and consulate. Unfortunately, we had cases where the seafarer travel documents, their passport has expired while they're waiting for their ship to find a place and a port to be repatriated from. In such cases when the seafarer passport or travel documents expire, there is some formality was required by the embassies and the consulate to extend the seafarer travel document to assist them to fly back to their home country as a requirement in the airport and for flight check-in. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, some embassies and consulate was not providing the required assistance to their citizens so as to fly from the UAE back home. So we had some cases which was really sad to see that the lack of cooperations in such an instance. The other challenge which has delayed the resumption of crew change in the UAE till August, as I mentioned earlier, is the closure of the airports in the seafarer countries and the suspensions of the airline services. To overcome this challenge, the UAE has facilitated and assisted the shipping companies who were willing to use chartered flights. Hundreds of seafarers has benefited from such flights. We saw shipping companies diverting their fleet in the region to the UAE so as to facilitate the crew change using the chartered flight. This is, I'm talking about April and May. Such a solution may not be viable for small companies, but it is recommended in the future and will be advisable that such small companies to cooperate with each other, so the financial burden of hiring a chartered flight will be distributed equally between different small companies. But the big companies, which they have a fleet in the region, in the Arabian Gulf, or they are working in the region, the other countries, they diverted, some of them, the big company, they diverted their fleet to the UAE, and we cooperated with them in permitting the chartered flight to help and to assist to solve the problem of the crew change. In addition, and to overcome the challenge of the airport closure and the suspension of airline services, the UAE has provided the assistance and cooperation for crew change by ships at sea. So new joiners of seafarers has sailed from their home country by ships to the UAE, where they have been sent to their respective ships at anchor, and sign-off were taken by the same ships back home, passenger ships mainly, although this practice has been mainly restricted to seafarers from the Indian subcontinent, benefiting from the short distance of sailing to the UAE. However, many seafarers has benefited from such services, and it helps in easing the difficulties of crew change. The UAE, and to ensure the smooth crew change process from its ports since its resumptions in August, adopted simple and straightforward procedure for crew change protocol, as no quarantine was required for the seafarers. No quarantine was required. The only requirement was to take the PCR test. The PCR test was conducted for the signing of seafarers on board their ships before their disembarkation, whether the ship is at anchor or it is at the port. The seafarer wait on board for their result, which will come out usually within 24 hours. And if the result was negative, they disembark their ships and taken to the airport or to the hotel waiting for their flights. And in case the test was positive, the test is reconducted again to ensure it is accuracy, because in some cases we noticed that the PCR test for one reason or another was not accurate. And if the result is still positive, medical care is provided to the seafarers. The same apply for joining seafarers who were required to present their PCR test only at the airport. While we are seeing small progress in solving the crew change crisis globally, as some ports start as well allowing the crew change to take place, we believe that we should learn from the experience gained during this pandemic so as to avoid similar crises in future. What happened has taken us by a surprise, in the sense that nobody was expecting that global lockdown will take place. Everybody was thinking about regional security issues, regional natural disaster, but we were not prepared. So the other things we should work from now to avoid similar crises, especially in the crew change. Okay, so just to sum up, it is recommended that for each port that we have a designated person under the supervision of the harbor master, considered as focal point for the crew change to provide assistance for agents calling ships and seafarer for smooth crew change process, a focal point required in each port. This is from me. Thanks a lot for your invitation once again.